Hi everyone. First of all, some people have not caught up with the fact that I am back on Twitter. My account is at MP McLachlan, and I'm so happy to hear from many of those who have found me how much you like my videos. Please hit like and share them to help me get more views. I'm really enjoying being back on Twitter, by the way, back in that very nurturing and supportive environment full of brilliant and articulate commenters. Secondly, it's been rather humbling to realise that Nicola Sturgeon herself must have watched my last video, Time to Resign, Sturgeon, and took my advice. Maybe I do have the power to change minds. Let's see how I get on with this guy, Avallone, whom I'd never heard of before, but I checked him out when someone commented thus: as much as I love Hunter Avallone on his defence to gay people, he needs to be debunked on his British TERFs debating him. Could you respond to his video? I have since found out that Hunter Avallone has been a huge and long-established presence on YouTube with hundreds of thousands of subscribers gained and lost and other ones gained. He was originally a young, white, angry American right-wing idiot, and judging by this video I've been asked to respond to, he is now just a young, white, angry American idiot. He has shifted politically. Mind you, I watched a bit of a video he made on why he left the right, and I think he came across quite well. I think he could turn out to be quite a nice bloke when he grows up. I read some of the comments below the video I'm going to talk about, and they were nasty and asinine about a woman with whom he had argued about transgenderism during a live call. So I wondered if this so-called British TERF had made a right fool of herself, and it was with some trepidation that I started watching. But it soon dawned on me that I could probably turn that video of Hunter's into a promotion for my Awful Arguments by Trans Activist series, because Hunter does come up with a few of them. I'll reference them as he comes up with each canard. The woman who called was okay. Her arguments were sound, though not particularly well expressed. I got the impression that she was a bit stoned or inebriated. There was a lack of conciseness. I mean, I think it's pretty hard to argue live like that, especially when you've been doing a bit of that. But Hunter was just terrible, and I eventually got too bored to continue. So I'm not responding to everything that he said that was wrong, but a couple of them are big issues, like how successful is medical transition in curing people's unhappiness and suicidality. These are issues I want to cover in separate videos this year. Okay, let's start with his definition of what a woman is.
Yeah, a woman is somebody whose internal perception aligns with what we culturally view as being feminine.
So
that's why my wife can be a woman, whether or not she's wearing a dress. That's why trans women are women. That's why wearing clothing, talking a certain way, fitting into a certain role does not determine whether or not you are a woman. That's also why experience does not determine whether or not you are a woman. It comes down to an internal perception you have of yourself.
So Hunter says a woman is someone who has an internal perception that aligns with what we culturally view as being feminine, and he obviously believes this very strongly because he said it no fewer than 7 times during the course of his video. Let's consider the pros and cons of this definition. An internal perception is a sense, a feeling. Hunter denies this. At one point we hear this exchange.
You can't just say, oh, I feel like a woman, so I am a woman. And it's the same as women.
They feel like a woman. It's that they have an internal identity, an internal perception of themselves that.
So, tell us, Hunter, what is the difference between an internal perception and a feeling? We mustn't let our detractors get away with this crap, people. All words have meanings, and in this context, the word internal perception means feeling, unless Hunter can come up with a clear alternative definition. A personal perception of what you are is subjective. It can't be observed or measured, and the huge advantage of reducing the state of being a woman to a feeling is that it allows any man who says he has that feeling, that internal perception, to claim that he's a woman, and there are a whole host of benefits that he gains as long as he is believed and accepted as a woman. This one wasn't. He got a prison sentence. But if he is, he can get into single-sex changing rooms and see women in various stages of undress, which, if he's heterosexual, as most men who claim to be women are, well, he's likely to enjoy that very much, isn't he? He might even be able to get a job helping a disabled woman get washed and dressed, and if she objects, she'll be called a transphobe and bigot. How about that? If he likes sport but isn't very good, he can get into a women's sport team where, due to his greater strength and speed, he can excel, etc., etc. Now, what are the disadvantages of saying that womanhood is purely an internal perception? I couldn't think of any for the men themselves. The only disadvantages seem to be to women and girls, but who cares about them? And what is meant by feminine anyway? Hunter does not tell us. He uses the phrase, what we culturally view as being feminine, implying that it can vary from culture to culture, which it does to some extent, but he doesn't give a single example. He only specifies what it doesn't necessarily involve. Again,
that's why wearing clothing, talking a certain way, fitting into a certain role does not determine whether or not you are a woman. That's also why experience does not determine whether or not you are a woman.
Isn't that wonderful? You don't even have to adopt the accoutrement de la féminité of what is culturally viewed as feminine to be a woman. You can be a hulking great bloke. You can grow a beard. You can talk over women like men so often do, including Hunter, who talks over his caller repeatedly. You can assault and rape women, as men so often do. You can actually be pretty masculine, what is culturally viewed as masculine, of course, in your appearance and behaviour, as long as you also have this mysterious, internal, subjective, unmeasurable, unverifiable perception that aligns with what we supposedly culturally view as feminine, but which is undefined. And what of all those women who spurn what we culturally view as feminine? Women like these, whose photos I lifted from a wonderful event I went to recently, organised by the LGB Alliance. Oh, that one's me just having a little joke. What say you, Hunter?
Feminine is a broad thing. There is lots of behavior, even arguably opposite types of behavior, that are both classified as being feminine.
Why, how very convenient. I would love to know, what are these arguably opposite types of behaviour Hunter has in mind? Or is he, as I suspect, just trying to cover all bases and doesn't actually have a clue what he himself means?
So yes, if your internal perception aligns with aspects of femininity amongst our society, which again, the external forms of gender influence your internal perception, then that is what makes somebody a woman.
And those women who actually feel more aligned with what we culturally view as masculine, what? They're not actually women, even though they say they are? This is absolute shite, Hunter. Okay, here comes a big canard. Reference my video, Sex versus Gender.
One thing I disagree with you on is like what a woman is, and basically I just don't agree that you can change your sex.
Well, I think a lot of the times people are talking about changing gender before sex. Now, it's true that some people will go through sex reassignment surgery. But usually what we're talking about, especially at the preliminary stage of being trans, is just changing your gender.
So just changing your gender, which might mean something to the person going through it, but it means absolutely nothing to those of us who are negatively impacted by men wanting into women's spaces. I'm really fed up of seeing this argument as if it's genuinely some kind of gotcha. Oh no, I'm not saying I've changed my sex. I've just changed my gender. Right. So you retain your entire male anatomy, but you now want into women's communal changing rooms and think you're entitled to women-only occupations like counselling survivors of rape and domestic violence or providing intimate care to disabled or elderly women. Why should we mind? We're all girls together, right?
You know,
well, first of all, I think that it's a little bit yikesy to assume that just if somebody has a penis that they're somehow incapable of running a rape crisis center.
Yikesy. I should point out that the caller did not say that a person with a penis can't run a rape crisis centre. She expressed disagreement with the notion that any man, regardless of what so-called gender-affirming medical intervention he has had, can be a woman and can, for example, be allowed to run a rape crisis centre. This was quite obviously not a comment on a man's ability to manage a project, but about the unsuitability of a man providing a service to women who have been violated and traumatised by one or more men. I suspect she had this bloke in mind. And although Hunter calls it yikesy, he claims to understand.
But I also can understand that if somebody has been sexually assaulted by somebody with a penis, they might be uncomfortable having somebody with that biological makeup in their space. That I can understand. The thing is,
oh no, I wouldn't. Even if he had the surgery, I wouldn't want him there.
Okay. So hold on. The thing that I think you're picturing somebody who's like burly, tough, big, muscular, ripped dude who just one day says like, I'm a woman, and then just like freely walks into the women's locker room. Now, that's not usually how this goes down.
Well, actually, it does quite often go down exactly like that. Men, especially violent criminals in prison, are suddenly deciding they are women in order to get transferred to the female estate. Scott McLaughlin, who was recently executed in the USA, suddenly realized he was a woman called Amber only after 15 years and all other moves to get a reprieve had been exhausted. Others may have taken a bit longer to claim a woman identity. The college swimmer, Lia Thomas, for example, I think it's fair to say he's a big, burly, muscular, ripped dude, and he used the women's locker room completely disregarding the feelings of his female teammates who were told by their coach to put up and shut up.
We did not give our consent. They did not ask for our consent. But in that locker room, we turned around and there's a 6'4" biological man dropping his pants and watching us undress.
They were treated with total contempt, which is an inevitable consequence of gender ideology. It is regressive. Perhaps, Hunter, you might consider how you will feel if your daughter is one day forced against her will to share a changing room with a big, burly, heterosexual man like Lia Thomas, or better still, how she will feel. Whose feelings will you care more about? Right, let's see what other canard Hunter can come up with.
If they are suffering from gender dysphoria, which is almost to be expected, because most trans people do suffer from some degree of gender dysphoria, then they are going to also take steps to socially transition, which is what is recommended medically. That is the first thing you're supposed to do.
Note the words recommended medically slipped in there because they are important. Some American doctors give the recommendation that people socially transition, and they do that, these American doctors, with all the authority that comes from making a living out of turning people into lifelong medical patients.
They know exactly what they're doing. Cash cowing.
I haven't done a video on that particular bad argument, by the way, but thanks for the idea.
if you force trans women to use the bathroom with other males, then that trans woman is more likely to be abused. And she's far more likely to be abused than she is to be a perpetrator.
Citation needed. I'm not saying it's not true, by the way. It may be that there are more victims than perpetrators amongst trans-identifying men, but when data is recorded on the basis of what sex one is pretending to be rather than what one is, it's hard to know the truth. But even if that were true, it does not mean they should be able to use women as shields, which is what you are advocating when you give that as a reason for letting them into women's single-sex spaces. Again, completely disregarding the feelings of the women in those spaces. If you want to make it just about safety, then I can give you plenty of examples of trans-identifying men who've committed sexual assaults on women and children, but it isn't just about safety.
So in a case like that, wouldn't it almost make sense to include somebody who is also at risk of being abused in some kind of a space in which they help people who have been abused or are at risk of being abused?
Sure, in some kind of space, not a space that has been set up to help women. I mean, actual women. Why is this basic principle that vulnerable women, traumatized women, any women shouldn't be forced to share spaces with men so hard to grasp? It shows such contempt for our humanity.
Yeah, but you're forgetting the fact that that trans-identified person is going to a bathroom.
A bathroom? Where'd you come from, love? This is what makes me think she's a bit high on something, and she was doing that thing that some people do of picking up the accent of the person they are talking to, and she's ended up sounding rather weird with the part English, part American accent. Sorry for the digression.
Which is male, and they are also male. I don't see, I feel like spaces should be divided by sex for the obvious reasons.
I don't think you actually believe that, though. What about trans people? Well, what about trans people that completely pass? Do you know who Blair White is?
Yeah, what's your, yeah.
Yeah, would you want to see Blair White in the men's bathroom?
Why wouldn't we? Whatever he looks like, Blair is a man, and he shouldn't be in women's spaces.
But you realize that if Blair White was sort of forced to use the bathroom that corresponded with her sex and not her gender, that's now putting her at higher risk of being abused.
Not our problem. Why is it that so many men are content to, firstly, just accept male violence as a fact of life, and secondly, expect women, many of whom are survivors of male violence, to have to put up with men in our spaces? We don't know which men might cause us problems and which ones won't. And Blair White may be a small, effeminate man, but he has a penis. I know this because he helpfully made a video explaining why he won't be getting that particular surgery. So while he may pass well enough to go into a ladies' room cubicle and nobody bats an eyelid, if he's stripping off in a communal changing room and taking communal showers, he won't pass because he has a dick. We don't want to see dicks in our showers. And any suggestion that some women have dicks and young girls should expect to see them sometimes in our changing rooms is grooming behaviour. As the father of a girl child, that is something you should be concerned about, Hunter. The chances of your daughter becoming the victim at some stage of inappropriate, sexually motivated behaviour by one or more male people, maybe boys, maybe men, unfortunately, those chances are pretty high because that is something girls and women go through. If you normalise the idea of penises in women's spaces, you are making it easier for predatory men. Think on. Here is the progressive position. Promote acceptability of non-conforming men to other men. Challenge male violence instead of just accepting it as inevitable, and don't expect women to have to compromise on our feelings and privacy and safety for those of non-conforming men. Okay, on to the next canard. Reference, video, kinds of women.
You're saying cis women. They're not cis women. They are women. That's why trans women aren't women, because they're trans.
No,
There's a
stop.
prefix.
No,
You
okay, so
haven't
what if
learned
there's a prefix? What? Are black women not women because there's a prefix of black? Come on.
my God.
Oh my God, indeed. Most of us are familiar with this racist trope now in which white women are seen as the norm, even though we are the minority, globally speaking, and black women are a subcategory with a prefix. It is so disgracefully common now that somebody even made this meme about it. It simply didn't occur to him to say it the other way round. Are white women not women because there's a prefix? Black and white are no more prefixes than are old, young, fat, thin. They are adjectives, describing words, as you may have learnt at primary school. They do not modify the meaning of the word, which is what prefixes usually do. Trans modifies the meaning of the word woman to mean not a woman, but a man who is trying to present as a woman. And yet many trans-identifying men are in denial about this and say, no, it's just an adjective. It describes what kind of women we are. You're not any kind of woman, which is why I don't use it. Cis, placed before the word woman, means nothing. It's superfluous. Forget all that crap about having a gender identity that matches her sex. What that does is normalize the regressive ideas about gender and makes patronizing assumptions about how someone feels about their sex. Assumptions which we have no business making about other people. Most importantly, its purpose is to reduce women or men to a subcategory of what we are, as if we're just another kind of woman or man alongside the trans. Finally, the other part of the sex versus gender canard.
But a woman is an adult human female. A trans woman is an adult human male. So
if you're going the biological route, that's fine. But you also then have to acknowledge that if you passed somebody in the street who looked like Blair White, you would consider her a woman, and you've never seen or verified the fact that she's female on a biological basis.
He seems to have a bit of a thing about Blair White. So what if you pass him in the street and don't notice that he's not a woman? What difference does that make to anything? He's still a man. He looks like a small, slightly built man presenting as a woman, and he's gay, so he may not be a physical threat or a sexual predator. But these are not the only ways in which men LARPing as women hurt us. They are potentially displacing women in all kinds of fields, in what are supposed to be all women shortlists, getting elected to what are supposed to be women's positions in student bodies and other organisations, getting jobs that should go to women. This is from the end of the conversation, and it's the same old, same old.
If your internal perception aligns with aspects of femininity amongst our society, which again, the external forms of gender influence your internal perception, then that is what makes somebody a woman. That is why somebody could be born without a uterus and still be a woman. That is why you don't need to see people's chromosomes or genitalia to determine whether or not they are a woman. Well, in that case, it would be based on their presentation. But even if they're not presenting that way, they could still be a woman.
In other words, there is no way of determining who is a woman or a man, presumably, except on their say-so. This is how we ended up with women getting raped in prison by men who claim to be women. Hunter, what the hell is it going to take to get through to you?
Look, so the argument is, a woman is an adult human female. An adult human female is someone who, a female is a human that is born with their body, not designed, because that's like a Jesus thing.
A Jesus thing. Pass me that spliff. Look, she does her best considering the state she seems to be in. She goes on to read out, by the sound of it, how biologists define male and female.
Female of or denoting the sex that can bear offspring or produce eggs, distinguished biologically by the production of gametes, ova, which can be fertilized by male gametes.
And Hunter comes back with the tired old canard about reducing women to their genitals. Reference my video on reducing women. I will link to my entire playlist of awful arguments by transactivists below, in the hope that anyone who can't see the problems with the kind of nonsense that is being spouted by the likes of Hunter will take the opportunity to get better informed. I am so tired of this stupidity, and what really makes me sick is how often it is men with considerable reach and influence on social media, and how callously they disregard the real impact this is having on women. You say you've left the right, Hunter, but by disregarding women's concerns and eroding our boundaries, you are making the right look good. There is nothing progressive about the stance you are taking, and this issue is destroying the left as well as hurting women and children. That is all. Thanks for watching.